For more than a year now, I have done this One Good Thing video series by just talking about whatever was important to me on that day. It was always based on what I needed or something I had found that I thought was interesting or something that I thought would be useful. And so the topics have been scattered all over the place, and that's been fine. That's been a good way to do things up until this point. But today we're going to start doing something different. Today we're going to give this video series some structure. We're going to start looking at a biblical book. We're going to spend our time in the book of Proverbs. Now, I like the book of Proverbs, especially for a format like this where we can kind of jump in and take one verse or two verses at a time, because the Proverbs are just a scattering of ideas. And as you teach the Proverbs, you have to know what they're trying to do and how to approach them. A guy named Lynn Anderson said one time in a lecture that I heard, he said this: "The Proverbs are not hard-bound rules." In other words, you will find exceptions to them, or at least seeming exceptions. The Proverbs will say things like, "The wicked will not prosper." And yet, right now, you could probably find a few wicked people who seem to be prospering. And so, the Proverbs have a bigger view of things, and they talk more about great big trends, not just the moment we're in necessarily. The Proverbs are trying to teach us to think in eternal ways and in big pictures. And so it may seem like the wicked are prospering right now, but the Proverbs would remind you that that's not the end of the story. So again, back to what Lynn said. He said the Proverbs are not hard-bound rules. Rather, they are a training manual for our character. I like that a lot. That the Proverbs are teaching us to think properly. They're teaching us to form a godly character. That's their purpose. So when we read the Proverbs, we fill our minds with God's thoughts. We fill our minds with the things that God thinks are important. We fill our minds with how He would react to situations if He were in them. And then that forms our character so that we respond in those ways and we look like godly people. That's going to be the goal of looking at the Proverbs for the next little while. Proverbs chapter 3 tells us that this is the goal, that this is what we're after, that this is the important part. Proverbs chapter 3 verses 13 through 15 say this: "Blessed is the person who finds wisdom." That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find God's wisdom, and not only find it, but live it and act like it and be directed by it. We're trying to find God's wisdom. "Blessed is the man who finds God's wisdom and who gains understanding. For she, wisdom, is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare to her." I don't know about you, but I think I spend a lot of time chasing a lot of things that really don't matter. I spend lots of times worrying about things that are just going to disappear at some point. I spend a lot of time pondering stuff that's just temporary. The Proverbs will teach us and remind us to think about things eternal. The Proverbs will help us to value the right things. The Proverbs will say wisdom is better than rubies or silver or gold. Get wisdom. The Proverbs will help us to have a more godly character, and that's going to be our goal for the next couple of weeks. Come join us as we look into the Proverbs and start thinking like God.